DuckTales! Woohoo! It is back, everyone. Disney announced as of 2 days ago today that DuckTales is coming back. Not they're rehashing reruns. They're bringing back a brand new series to Disney XD in 2017, and I gotta tell you, I couldn't be more excited. As a kid who grew up in the late 80s, early 90s, I am ecstatic that one of the best TV shows Disney has ever done, next to Darkwing Duck or Gargoyles, has ever, it's coming back. Look, this was a T-shirt that I made at Design a T for a while ago, and as you can see, it's a little worn. I've got, of course, some of you know I do my pipe cleaners, so of course I've got Scrooge McDuck, got Gizmo Duck, and I've got Launchpad McQuack, and I brought them here with me. Heck, I even have this poster, thanks to my girlfriend, of, this poster right up here for DuckTales. I know you can't see that real well, but there you go. In short, DuckTales was a TV show that I grew up on, and I'm more than ecstatic that Disney is bringing back. But that's not to say I don't have my concerns. Of course I do. And because I'm in my late 20s, of course I don't want some things to change, but I know they do. So the more I thought about it, the more I realized there's going to be a lot of changes to DuckTales as a series. And for the better, for the worse, we have yet to see. Right now, it's the last days of February of 2015, and so we still have 2 more years to go, and how many months, who knows. So I wanted to kind of put this video online and talk to anyone who's willing to listen about what I think is set to happen for the next move for DuckTales to make. So let's talk about some of these points. The first thing is the voice cast. If you've ever watched the TV show DuckTales, you know the voice cast is beyond amazing. You have Alan Young as Scrooge. You have Russi Taylor, better known as the voice of Minnie Mouse. She was Huey, Dewey, Louie, and Webby or Webbigail Vanderquack. You have Terrence McGovern, who was Launchpad McQuack. You have Hal Smith, who was Gyro Gearloose and Flintheart Glomgold. You have Hamilton Camp, who was Fenton or Gizmo Duck. You had, oh my gosh, you had so many great people on this show. And here's the thing. In 2013, Disney brought back the classic Capcom game of DuckTales, and people just went nuts. It was a fantastic game, and they brought back as many of the original voice casts as they could. Even Alan Young and June Foray are both in their mid-90s. June Foray, by the way, was the voice of Ma Beagle and Magica De Spell. And those two are in their 90s. Chuck McCann, another veteran voice actor, he was the voice of Duckworth. He's 81 now. So to bring these people back, including Russi Taylor and Frank Welker and Terrence McGovern, they all came back and they delivered in spades. It was like reliving my childhood all over again. And I didn't even play the video game. Either of them, actually. So, but there's at least 3 cast members that we do need to point out who have since passed on since the release of the game. Hamilton Camp, as I mentioned, Gizmo Duck, Hal Smith, like I said, Gyro Gearloose and Flintheart Glomgold, and Joan Gerber, who played Mrs. Beakley. So this is going to be a tough one, because the biggest question I have is, if this show's coming out in 2017 and is going to run for an extensive period of time, who are they going to do the voices? It's a safe bet to say that, okay, maybe they'll bring back some of the originals. Maybe Russi Taylor will come back. Maybe they'll bring back whatever they could. For the video game, the guy they got for Flintheart and Gyro and Mrs. Beakley, they did really, really well. I was really impressed. It was like hearing them all over again, even though they've obviously passed on. The guy who did Gizmo Duck and Fenton, it didn't quite grab me the same way, but he did a really good job. It was like 90% spot on, so kudos to that guy. So, and of course, like I said, you have at least 3 actors who are above the age of 80. So what does that say? They have very distinctive voices that are very hard to replicate and to bring about. So the biggest concern, more than anything, is of course Scrooge himself. Scrooge is easily one of the most iconic characters, and he was one of the ones who brought the show to the forefront. And you could bring about a number of Scottish actors. By the way, Alan Young is Canadian, but he has the Scottish accent, which made it so indelible and so perfect. The only other time Scrooge was ever voiced by someone other than him was in a short cartoon in the 60s called Scrooge McDuck and Money, where he was voiced by Dallas McKennon, I think it was, or either Bill Thompson, I can't remember. But either way, he did a good job, but Alan Young is the Scrooge. He's been doing Scrooge since Mickey's Christmas Carol in 1983. So Disney, hire whatever Scottish actor you have to. Anyone who can do a perfect Scottish accent and still personify Scrooge McDuck as we know him to be. I mean, get just about anyone you want. The only person I don't want doing it is Craig Ferguson. I got nothing against Craig. I don't. Nothing. Nada. But he just doesn't do anything for me. I can't explain it. I'm sure he's a wonderful person. He's funny. But there's just something about him. And maybe it's ever since Owl in 2011's Winnie the Pooh that something turned me off. But I'll tell you what. If you really need someone to do the voice of Scrooge, I'll volunteer. I'll work on my Scottish accent. I can do the best I can. I cannot be the perfect Scrooge, but I can perfect it even better. If you're from Scotland, I apologize. But you get my point. So the voice cast is going to be a big question mark, especially since they've already announced many of the characters who are coming back. They said Gyro and Scrooge, Magica. They said all the major characters are coming back. The only one I think they didn't mention was Gizmo Duck and Bubba the Cave Duck. But yeah, so we'll have to see about that. Number 2, the animation style is going to change. There's already been some art that was released to exemplify what the show's going to be, and it looks like something out of a little golden book. Looks great, looks awesome. If they can keep doing that, major props to whoever is going to be doing the art direction for the show. If they can do anything closely resembling what they're doing for what they did for the original show, I will be more than happy. Of course, there's something weird going on these days, and a lot of TV shows nowadays, especially on Cartoon Network, there seems to be a lot of shows that seem to do this new style where everything looks like it's scribbled on a napkin. If you like it, fantastic. But I mean, look, you got Clarence, you've got Regular Show, you've got Adventure Time, Star versus the Forces of Evil. There's a lot of shows out there that have decided to adopt the style where everything is very simple shapes and very over the top. Worst case example, the new Mickey Mouse cartoons where everything looks like it is crazy and someone doesn't have the patience to do nice, careful lines to draw all the characters. And yes, Scrooge McDuck, played by Alan Young, even cameoed in one of the cartoons, Goofy's First Love, something like that. I almost went nuts, but it just looked too weird, especially since Duckworth wasn't the butler. But I digress. If they do this weird loopy animation style, I don't know how I'm going to feel about that. Animation style is one of the things that turns me off on a show. People say Adventure Time is one of the best shows on TV out there. I just can't get into it. Every time I see the trailers, it looks so scribbled, and I don't know, it reminds me of just like, I don't know, it just does not look promising. But, if it's DuckTales, if the writing is smart, if it's a well done show, then I'll be happy. Then there's also the discussion people say it might be CGI. I don't quite see it, but, there's a lot of things I didn't see that obviously happen, so we'll have to wait and see what turns up with those. So, if it's CGI, okay, fine, whatever, I'll grow to accept it. If it's loopy hand-drawn style, come on, but it's DuckTales, why not? But if they can closely emulate the original style from the TV show, or better yet, if they can closely emulate the style of the Carl Barks or the Don Rosa comics, which is the definitive Scrooge. Before DuckTales was a thing, this was where you would find Scrooge McDuck. If they can do more closely to this, I think that would be an amazing tribute to the man who created him, Carl Barks. So, number 3, the theme song. You know it. I know it. Kick it. Amazing theme song. Absolutely wonderful. It sticks in your head. It has a great upbeat tune to it. So it's got to come back, right? I would wager money that, yes, I am willing to bet that the theme song will come back in spades. We've seen with the reboot of Nickelodeon's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles that the theme song came back. Was it exactly what we remembered? No, but they did bring it back, and that said a lot for what they thought of the fans, especially the nostalgic adults like me that grew up on Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and DuckTales. So, what does that say about DuckTales? Well, it's probably going to be more updated and made more modern. Kind of like when the show Phineas and Ferb was made. The creators of the show kept it very Disney, they said, so it had a very gentle, lilting melody to it. But when the show really started to get an identity during development, they decided that to edge it up with more of a rock version. That's the version we hear today. So we might hear something like that. We might hear a rock version of DuckTales, and I'm sure someone on YouTube has done something like that and done justice to it. And I say great. Then there's also the possibility that they could turn it into a rap of some sort, and I don't know how I feel about that. I really don't. Do I look like a guy who's into rap? But of course, it's not made for me, so I understand. And again, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles did the same thing. They did Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Heroes in the Half Shell Turtle Power, and then they broke into a rap. If it can at least be done intelligently, I think most of us wouldn't have a problem. I think a lot of purists would. And, call me a purist. I won't be offended, but I understand change happens and you have to adapt to the times. And you can't please everybody, least of all nostalgic adults, because this is going to be made for kids. This is going to be on Disney XD. So it's got to preach to a new audience. And that has to be kept in mind. Number 4, this one's really weird. The political and economics landscape has changed tremendously. The show came out in the late 80s and ended in 1990. For those who weren't around back then, and frankly, I was too. I was 4 by the time the 90s started, so what do I know, right? But from things that I've read and heard about, the 80s were a period of where they say greed was good. So this was a time where there was a lot of economic prosperity. We didn't have to deal with the recession of the 70s. I mean, the 80s were definitely the era of Reagan and Reaganomics. And then of course you had this show about an extremely wealthy character who traveled the world, and he fought off those dirty criminals who wanted his money. And of course we're always going to root for someone just trying to protect his own investments and his money. It's a relatable story. We get it. And the travel stories were often what made the show work, of seeing Scrooge, Huey, Dewey, Louie travel the world and finding treasure. That's what made the show work. But today's economic times are very, very different. There's still rich people, there's still poor people, and there's still resentment on both sides. But the biggest change is it's more polarized than it ever was before. Again, I'm not saying poor people didn't hate rich people and rich people didn't dislike poor or whatever, but this is very difficult, especially considering a few years ago we had the Occupy Wall Street movement, and people who talked about DuckTales often said Occupy Duckburg. We had the 99% and the 1% movements, so there was that. That's fine. I understand. Just it has to be at least accessible to today's audiences. So I don't know. It's hard to describe, but I have a feel. I mean, I can still watch Scrooge and DuckTales and not be affected by it, but that's also a very nostalgic haze I'm looking at. So who's to say? Maybe it'll be all the better for it, or maybe they won't change a thing. But it's just something to consider. It's a question to ask, and if anyone has any input, please share with me. I mean, if you think that's going to be a big factor or not, please let me know. I could. One of the things I was thinking is, what if Scrooge does like appear on Undercover Boss, or if they do like a allegory for minimum wage, or maybe even maybe they could work a few Disney cameos in there, like Steve Jobs, or like maybe Steve Careers. Who knows? That could be great. And speaking of cameos, that's another one I want to talk about, is cameos. Ever since, cameos have been around for a long time, and them appearing in Disney movies has been since forever. But Avengers in 2012 proved more than anything that we love our crossovers if they're done right. And we've seen crossovers in so many TV shows, so many comic books, so many movies. Sometimes they work, Sometimes they don't. It largely depends on the writer. So, even if you pick up the DuckTales comic books these days, um, they'll usually tie in some gag. Um, there was one in a Darkwing Duck comic book a while ago in which Launchpad was talking about not having a job, and so it shows a flashback in which he tried to volunteer to fly the Ranger plane from the Rescue Rangers, and Gadget just shaking her head. That's great. And if we can do that kind of thing for this, that would be spectacular. Disney has gotten to the point where they can just use anything from their stable, and we will go nuts over it. I mean, we saw that with Lilo and Stitch the series. We saw that with House of Mouse. So, but I'm not saying like, one day we'll see Mickey Mouse. They did say that Donald Duck is going to be in the series, so that's great. But there's some cameos that I think would be absolutely awesome. Most of them aren't going to work, but there is one cameo in mind that is worth mentioning. The terror that flaps in the night himself, Darkwing Duck. Why, you're asking? Probably, I'm assuming. Well, here's a couple things. First of all, when DuckTales ended and Darkwing Duck was its own show, because Darkwing Duck was a spin-off, that's why Launchpad was in both series. I just totally lost my train of thought. Okay, yeah. Darkwing Duck was a spin-off of DuckTales. And it makes sense because, again, Launchpad. However, when the show finally spun off, Gizmo Duck ended up appearing in several of the episodes. Tiff of the Titans and a few others I can't even begin to remember. But there was always a rivalry between Darkwing Duck and Gizmo Duck. And now that superheroes, thanks to Marvel, are such a big thing now, this will be a huge missed opportunity if these two did not face off again at least once more. Maybe we can work in S.H.I.E.L.D. Maybe we can work in the Avengers, or at least Duck versions of the Avengers. Who knows? Again, not having these superheroes in this show is a big missed opportunity. They've announced a lot of the major characters coming back, but they did not mention Gizmo Duck. So who knows? Who knows at all? The other thing to keep in mind is that would not be the first time that Darkwing Duck and DuckTales have crossed over on a big scale. In the comics that were released a few years ago, we ended up getting this. This is Dangerous Currency from Darkwing Duck and DuckTales, which was just the Darkwing Duck series, and then eventually they crossed over. And as they say up here, this is a crossover 20 years in the making. This comic book was written by Warren Spector, the guy who gave us Epic Mickey. And this is a fantastic comic book. If you haven't had a chance to read it, I strongly recommend it. The scenes that Scrooge and Darkwing Duck share in the comic book in a few scenes is just remarkably deep. And I fell in love with it. So, again, they can exist on the same plane of existence, and I don't see why not. And more importantly, one of the only people I know that can do the voice of Darkwing Duck is Jim Cummings himself, the original Darkwing Duck. And if you look online on any of the YouTube videos and see him at any con, he's there doing it. He'll do his Don Carnage, he'll do his Winnie the Pooh, he'll do his Tigger. I mean, I think all of you have seen the video of him doing Winnie the Pooh as Darth Vader, and then he'll slip in a Darkwing Duck, and people lose it. So Jim Cummings can still do it. He can still deliver. And if he at least cameos for a few episodes, I don't think there's any single fan out there who would not appreciate it. Including Erod from Channel Awesome. I know he would absolutely lose his mind. So Darkwing Duck should appear in at least a handful of episodes. There's just no reason why not. And if this works out, maybe we can get Darkwing Duck rebooted. Who knows? The possibilities are endless. And that's what makes this awesome. Okay, 6. Character personality alterations. This one, I think I kind of see coming. If we're lucky, maybe they'll keep the characters perfectly the same. We'll still have Scrooge as being cantankerous, edgy, and stingy, but with a heart of gold, and he loves his family and has strong morals. Maybe we'll see the nephews, Huey, Dewey, and Louie, as just little kids who cause trouble from time to time, but They got a spirit. But as we've seen with the new Mickey Mouse cartoons, the personalities can change. I saw in the No Service cartoon Goofy just kind of snapped at Donald and Mickey, and that was out of character. I don't care if he knew who they were or not. There's that. There was a lot of Mickey just seems spastic, and I get it. Mickey's a very hard character to adapt, but I can't help but thinking that if they readapt these characters to modern times, there's probably going to be some serious changes. What changes? My guess, they'll probably make Scrooge a little bit darker and a little edgier. The thing I love about Scrooge is because he's old and he has a lot of wisdom, he's also very hardy. He's strong, he's athletic, he doesn't take no for an answer. There was an episode where he wound up in jail and wound up arm wrestling everyone just in no time flat. And that's the kind of thing I like about Scrooge, is because he has such gusto and such strength, not just in character but physicality, and that's what makes him a fun character to watch, especially for being so strong and moral. So they might try to work in like an anti-hero angle, I could see, regrettably. Huey, Dewey, and Louie, maybe they'll go Quackback. I don't know. I know that show wasn't particularly liked. I think I saw like an episode a long time ago, so making them teenagers with clearer voices, I could see happening. I really don't want it to, but who knows? They might have grown and aged. Who knows? I'd hate to see Scrooge in a wheelchair or something. Yikes. Webby they could probably get away least with, because having a character as girly as she was, probably not as much anymore. I mean, I think the only exception these days is Isabella from Phineas and Ferb, but she has her moments where she is such a strong character. Webby in the original DuckTales series got by just being a cute, precious little thing. And to be fair, it didn't make her a bad character, it just made her uninteresting, at least from a male point of view. So, I don't know, if you liked Webby, fantastic. But, So, and another thing. What if they change things like, making Flint Heart Glomgold South African again? This is going to be really controversial, and the reason they reversed it in DuckTales to make him Scottish was because of the controversy in the South African government. So, who knows? I mean, I don't keep up with anything going on in South Africa these days, so your guess is as good as mine. But I'm willing to bet they'll probably keep him Scottish. Number 7, the jokes are going to be edgier. I keep talking about the new Mickey Mouse cartoons, but there's no way around it. There's a lot of jokes in there that just always leave me really uncomfortable as a 20-something odd-year-old guy who did grow up on original Mickey Mouse cartoons in the Disney afternoon. Like, the one whole cartoon was just Mickey running around naked. And there's just a lot of jokes that usually just involve, like, butts, farts, things like that. And I'm not saying these didn't exist back in the late 80s, early 90s. I mean, Ren and Stimpy. I was the generation that grew up with Ren and Stimpy. Enough said. But Disney is trying to adapt, and they're not usually doing it very well. I don't know what they could possibly do and write edgier jokes, but, the humor in DuckTales is good in the original series, but what they'll have to do to modernize it and make it more catchy for kids these days is a big question mark. Will it be funnier? Is Launchpad going to be, dumber for more comedic offerings? Is he going to be more like what he was in Darkwing Duck than he was in DuckTales? Because not just in design sense, but he was in Darkwing Duck, he was not very bright. And at least in DuckTales, he was more of a heroic character. There he was a sidekick. So that's a really big question. I don't know what they're going to do if they make the jokes edgier. And of course, I can't predict what things are going to be like in 2017, but who knows? Maybe it will be exactly like the original. But again, these are just my speculations. But the last point I definitely want to bring up is the geographical landscape. Now, of course, you think DuckTales, it's not anywhere. It's kind of America-ish. They try to make it seem, and they travel the world and they actually go to real locations. Not really, they didn't. Most of the time, every time they traveled in the show, they went to fictional locations. I think this was just more as a means to avoid any contention with any sort of the populace and just trying to be on good terms with everyone. So there's that, and I would say that Disney doesn't do that anymore, but come on, we in Phineas and Ferb we have Drusselstein, which is sort of Germany-ish. So, but if you watch a lot of the original DuckTales, you'll notice many times they'll travel to these way far off places in the middle of jungles and basins and rainforests, and they usually meet tribesmen. And of course, late 80s, early 90s, you really can't get away with that these days. So, are they going to have more realistic geographical locations? Are they going to travel to places like, who knows, Russia? Maybe they'll travel to Japan. That'd be cool, seeing Scrooge and nephews in Tokyo. Or maybe they'll go, gosh, I don't know. Maybe they'll go to Rio de Janeiro. Maybe they'll go to Australia. Maybe they'll go to the UK. I mean, there's so many possibilities. And now that we're definitely in an era where, I don't want to say politically correct anymore, but we're definitely moving toward more of a tolerance of political correctness rather than just straight up can't offend anybody. But they can still have fun with these characters and still have fun with regions. But it really, who knows? It's a big question mark, and hopefully they'll work on it. Which leads me to another character from DuckTales, Dijon. If you ever watched DuckTales the movie, you may remember this character. He's just this wormy, sycophant little miscreant who's just a thief. And this was when they traveled out into the middle of the desert and Lamp, and there's Murloc the wizard and all that, but he's just this wormy, nasty little thief that makes, I don't know, it's just, he's not a very likable character. I mean, I'm sure there's people out here that like him, but he has a very thick accent that's, I think it's Indian? Is it Arabic? I don't think so, but just the whole, oh, don't worry about me, please. I am just trying to steal something. Ugh. I doubt he's going to make a return, and if he does, it's going to be under a completely different guise. So, let's wait and see what happens. So, just to finally say, I am all for this to happen. I am stoked as heck. DuckTales is coming back. I could probably be reliving my childhood. Excuse me. I'm going to go watch my DVDs at some point just to relive all the memories. I'll be playing with these guys. By the way, they're available on Etsy if you really want to take a look around. And I do commissions if you're curious. Sorry for the shameless plug. But DuckTales is back. Couldn't be happier. Nervous at some of the changes. But if I could be involved in the show, I would love to help out and maintain the integrity of all these characters. Even if it has to be Scrooge McDuck, if you need me there. Or you need a new launch pad McQuack. Right on, Mr. McD. Or you need a new Gizmo Duck. Don't worry, Gizmo Duck is here to save the day. Right, Mama? I still have to work on some of them. Thanks for your time, and remember, DuckTales, woo!